In commemorating, appreciating and supporting the efforts to keep the Namibian Constitution alive in all generations, Gondwana Collection Namibia invited the remaining 12 of the 21 constitutional writers to take part in the great conversation. This historic reunion took place in the Constitution Room where the committee gathered 30 years ago. The aim of the Great Conversation is to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the adoption of the Namibian Constitution under the 2020 theme, Reflecting on the Constitution.
I'm over the moon with excitement of seeing the founding fathers and a mother of our Constituent Assembly and members of the drafting committee of the Constitution. We have been able to find time to come together here in the Constitution Room. Honorable members, as we prepare ourselves to mark the occasion of the Constitution Day on the 9th of February. This is the Constitution Room that was our working place. I recall those days and weeks where we sit here. Of course, we all know our Constitution stands for freedom, democracy, pluralism, and thereby paving the way that led to our nationhood as an independent nation. Today we are proud in referring to the work that we have done championing the cause of our freedom and independence that led to one Namibia, one nation. It has been a long journey that culminated in us being an independent nation. We look forward to celebrating the Constitution Day on the 9th of February, as I said, and thereby marking 30 years of our country's independence. Indeed, this is a document that has guided us so well, so far, and that will be there to ensure that Namibia continues to function as an independent nation in peace and stability.
And these men and women have made it what it is today. That the young people ought to see the people who actually ingeniously went into a room and with hammers and chisel they brought about this constitution of Namibia.
But I thank all of you for pushing through. You never gave up, you just continued to fight for what you believe in. Freedom of our country, freedom of our people, and ultimately you succeeded. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. It's such a privilege to be with you today, all of you. Thank you for the opportunity.
It was due to the acumen, now President of the Republic of Namibia, Dr. Hage Geingob, that he was able to create the chemistry that created an atmosphere in that room for us sometimes to smile and laugh at, which I thought was remarkable. The task is still incomplete. We have many things to accomplish that we have not yet touched on. We are just 30 years old, still young in the creation of nations. The future is still very bright for its country, and I'm sure that one of these days we will unite again for those who will be left behind, to say thanks to those who departed before us, but who have left us with a glorious constitution that kept us together. When we sat here, we had a task of actually formulating a constitution for all our people, not just for some people or for some ethnic groups, for all Namibians, regardless of their colors and ethnic origins and so forth.
Looking back, I think the speakers of our parliament have a very, very golden opportunity to make sure that what we stood for and what we did those days remain relevant. I think 30 years ago, we were confronted with a situation. We found ourselves on different sides of the road to independence, and we were conscious that any misstep on our part could be a setback to what we wanted to achieve. But coming together that first day in our deliberation, every group had their own draft constitution until we agree which one of the constitution will be the working document. We wrote that constitution in 80 days, and that reminds one of a book, Around the World in 80 Days. And we are satisfied with what we have achieved. And every day that we sat here, we learn from each other. And we learn to accept that this country was our country, all of us. A spirit of brotherliness, which stretched not only in Namibia, but all over. I saw President Kaunda, I saw Mandela, it was just an occasion that reflected that, yes, in spite of what happened in the past, it is our country. Now we should possibly say that it is our country and the future of our future generation.
I'm very, very pleased to see my seniors. That time I was one of the youngest. It is exactly 30 years ago, around this time, that the Constituent Assembly was sweating it out to deliver to the Namibian people a document capable of governing their public life. In its wisdom, the Constituent Assembly selected a committee of 21 persons to draft what would become the Namibian Independent Constitution. Thank God, matters have been made easier, as almost all political parties had proposals as to what should form the basis of the Constitution. Amongst the available draft constitutions, the SWAPO of Namibia draft constitution was chosen as proposed by Honourable Dirk Mudge of the DTA. That indeed made the process of finding common grounds much easier and faster. The Namibian Constitution therefore lays down the following principles: democracy, the rule of law, and justice for all. These are wide and deep fundamental constitutional principles upon which our public affairs are based. It is due to these principles that we hold regular elections, enact laws to govern individual conducts and behaviors, and empower, authorize, and regulate governing institutions in dealing with the public affairs. We are having courts adjudicating cases brought before them without any discrimination on whatever basis. The Constitution has also created safeguards through the inclusion of the fundamental human rights and freedoms. Is Namibia on the right path into the future? It's my question. This is not for me to say, but each one of us must have gathered some experiences to answer the question. Our governance institutions still in tune with the Constitution? If not, what needs to be done and by who? And I think we should celebrate the Constitution Day in a much more vigorous way. if there is anything that I have realized as a shortcoming on my side and the SWAPO side, is the fact that when we adopted that constitution, we sat back and expected everybody to understand and internalize that constitution. But, Common Speaker, it's not true. Our people do not understand the principles underlined in that constitution. Even us, who have been in the driving seat of government, we don't understand. Therefore, we should strive hard to really take the constitution down to the people so that they understand how they are empowered in order to preserve this society.
I can tell you the first meeting was charged. Thanks to the chairman, our current president, he broke the ice. Then we started to work. Practical reconciliation started here. We have been talking about reconciliation as a political concept, but the real practical reconciliation started here when we started to listen to each other from different viewpoints. So we had to work our way through consensus building, sometimes very difficult. So these are some of the backgrounds which form to the basis of that constitution, which I think they are supposed to be celebrated in a country as diversified as Namibia. Consensus building, listening to each other, taking each other's concerns into consideration. I think to me those were the most important issues. The constitution eventually, as we sit here, is just any other law in Namibia to the ordinary person. It is not the fundamental law we meant it to be. We were just servants of the people at that time. We did that job, but I think we have not really, as a government, gone further to make sure that these documents popularized within the population.
Some of us now are expired. A person who surprised me at that time was Honourable Dirk Mudge. Out of a blue, he said the document of SWAPO should be there. I almost collapsed. But the loopholes that allow other people to become citizens, I don't know whether we cannot be overrun by others as the time goes on. There are certain things that we have to look at. The water will come into the house and you don't have anything to take them out, so that we can keep our country like an egg. We don't have any other property we have except for the country.
I said, when we walked in here the first time, to me it was like storming the Bastille. It was a momentous occasion. It was a spirit of compromise, because without that spirit we would have never gotten anywhere. And it started off, as it was rightfully pointed out, by first of all SWAPO adopting the 435 principles, and then Mr. Mudge, Honourable Mudge. In those days he all surprised us when he came in and said the working document will be the SWAPO constitution, the proposal, and it was supported by the other parties. They all had their own drafts. Most important, I think, was that spirit. Looking at the faces who are not present anymore now, Jan is very moved. Let us continue sharing and engaging in the spirit of the Constitution, driving the Constitution, what informed the Constitution, the values which go far wider than the words in the document. It is that spirit, that commitment, that value proposition which bound us together and which produced that Constitution, and which should be the basis on which we bring back our people, every one of us, to a shared culture. Constitution making is not just a matter of writing a law and then putting it away in some drawer. It's very real. It's very real to people. It's very real to very real people to have a constitution. It is the basis on which we bring government to account. It is the basis on which we are driving for making good on the promise of dignity. so that people have a toilet in the mornings, and water, and power, wherever they live. And they have an education, not in a tent, and not in a class of 80. We must not allow reality, the institutions, the government, the people to move away from the values of the Constitution. It will undermine it and it will destroy it over time. All of us have a duty to continue this shared commitment, to engage with one another and make good on the promise in the Constitution of freedom and dignity and democracy and sharing and caring and respect. Those are fundamental values. Those are challenges arising from the Constitution, and we must meet them. This generation, the next generation, but we must always bring it back to the constitutional first principles and promises. If we don't, we fail. If we don't, we have failed.
To my surprise, the governing party, SWAPO, allowed themselves to govern this country by the Constitution. Citizenry need to be educated about their rights. The right thing would have been if our Constitution was part of our curricula in schools, so that every citizen is educated about his rights.
They were shocked when Dirk here, when he proposed that the SWAPO constitutional proposals be used as the working document for our discussions. Truth be told, they were not surprised. They were shocked to such an extent that the top SWAPO strategist, the late Hidipo Hamutenya, you could see that he was wondering what the hell is going here. And he raised his hand and asked for the chair for a short break so that he can consult and rally the troops to find out what is going here. Our president, the current president and chair of the conference at that point, was in no mood for adjournments. He said, guys, there's a proposal on the table. We have been squabbling because at that point the spirit was one of, as I think everybody said here, it was a combative situation. Geingob said, no proposal, no adjournments. There's a proposal, so yay or nay. Everybody was forced now to vote on this thing or express themselves, and well, the proposal was adopted unanimously. And only after the unanimous adoption, then Geingob said, okay, now you can have go and consult. That was the real icebreaker. The proposal from the majority party was adopted on the request of the majority of the opposition party. And nobody knew what was in that proposal. That's when we said, now we are in it together. We either sink or we swim together as Namibians. And that is the spirit that permeated the rest of the negotiations. Even on the most of difficult issues. But to me, the important and critical part in this constitution, if I have to pick one, is the preamble. If you read that one, it is the soul of the constitution. Is what we have said, where do we come from, the rear mirror, and is the big windscreen. What are we preserving for ourselves and for our future generations? A peaceful, stable, democratic Namibia. We have succeeded in creating that. We have it. We want to secure for ourselves and our children justice, pursuit of happiness, which is prosperity, liberty, and equality. That remains a challenge because people cannot eat political rights. And I think that promise still remains outstanding 30 years on. It's time to sit back and say, take stock.
All we need is a little more optimism, a little more enthusiasm. We can even say a little more boasting, bragging about what we're doing in the country. There are problems, of course there are problems, but we should not let the problems overcome. We should handle the problems, and we can do that. With people like you, we can handle any problem.